and my co-PI is Dr. Mariano Roy Tuya. So for this afternoon, I wanted to tell you about the stories in the field because as students, as young researchers, you get to read our results, our papers from scientific publications, but you won't always get to hear the stories behind those publications. So that's what I wanted to share to you this afternoon. So to start off, we all know the importance of long-term ecological research. So So it addresses questions on certain ecological processes governing forest dynamics, such as what factors or mechanisms influence spatial distribution of trees, how does mortality and also recruitment maintain plant populations, what environmental factors affect the flowering and fruiting of plants, and what phenological patterns affect the feeding habits of forest animals. So to do long-term ecological research, it takes a whole lot of effort. So throughout the world, we have a network of forest plots. So this is called the Forest Geo Network. It is a global network that is composed of many plots across the whole globe. So we have 84 plots being monitored under this network, and it is performed in 30 countries. And among those 84 plots, there is a total of more than 1,800 hectares. So in some plots, like here in the Philippines, we have 16 hectares, but for the African plots, they have as big as 120 hectares of forest monitored. So in this 1,800 hectares, there's about 1 million trees that is monitored. 7 million trees that is monitored that is as small as your little finger. So if a tree reaches this diameter, it is then tagged and monitored until it dies. So that's how intensive the monitoring of the forest are with this network. So in total, there's about 30,000 tree species that is being monitored in this network. So in the Philippines, within this network, there's only one representative plot, and that is the Palanan Forest Dynamics plot. So we are here now in the province of Laguna, in the island of Luzon, towards the western coast of the Philippines. Our plot is towards the east, facing the Pacific Ocean. So it is in the northeastern coast of the Luzon Island, so the yellow spot right there. And it is part of the Sierra Madre mountain range. So you can see the northeastern coast of the island. There's a contiguous green area. We call that the Sierra Madre mountain range. And that is the mountain range that gets the brunt of all the typhoons that pass through this island. So the plot was established in 1994 as an 8-hectare plot. And within those 8 hectares, as I mentioned, if a tree falls as small as your little finger to as big as maybe 10 people in diameter, they are identified, they are tagged, they are mapped and measured. In 1998, it was doubled to 16 hectares, and this 16 hectares is recensused every 6 years. So 2004, 2010, 2016, and most recently we have a 2023 data set. So this represents a 29-year data of forest monitoring for the 8 hectares and a 25-year forest monitoring data for the 16 hectares. So this is one of the most intensive data sets in the Philippine forests. Sorry. So the Palanan Forest Dynamics plot, it is a low type of mountain, not unlike the Makiling here that reaches high elevations. We only have about 125 meter elevation in Palanan. is 340 cm annually. It is also characterized by clay loam soils. So, like what Dr. Malyari showed earlier, the Philippines is part of the typhoon path that comes from the Pacific Ocean. So, this is only from Luzon Island. So, within the last 80 years, 580 tropical cyclones passed in Luzon Island. So, we are here in Luzon Island, but you can't see the island down, but we are there right in the middle. So, 580 typhoons have passed these areas since the last 80 years. In contrast, in Borneo, just a little bit below in latitude, there's less than 10 tropical cyclones that passed within the same period. So that's the stark contrast between the Philippines and the islands below it. So, because the Palanan Plot is in a region that is regularly devastated by typhoons, it is a perfect avenue to look at the adaptive responses of our forests to natural disturbances. So an example is this. This is after Typhoon Harurot in 2004. So you can see the brown areas are the ridges of the mountains being devastated, but the valleys in green are relatively left untouched. This is after Typhoon Megi in 2010, just right after a recensus where the plot PIs had to be choppered away just so that they can escape the ravage of the typhoon. And then most recently, this is the aftermath of Typhoon Mangkut in 2018. So if you look at the sky, this is what you will see. In contrast, we took a drone photo of this same area, and this is it. So it's a closed canopy area, but right after a super typhoon, it will have almost no canopy at all. So if you compare it to the plots around Southeast Asia, the most stark comparison would be the annual rainfall. So you would have a lot in Palanan, but the almost comparable basal area for the other Southeast Asian plots. So because of the distinctness of the situation and attributes of the Palanan plot, it is absolutely necessary to continue studying it. However, getting to the Palanan plot itself is another adventure. So from here in Laguna, you take about a 2-hour ride to Manila, a 10-hour bus up north, and then you arrive in a province called Isabela. Once you get there, you have to ride a really small plane to cross the Sierra Madre Range. Because it's very hard to reach it by boat because it's the Pacific. You have a lot of 2-meter waves in the Pacific. So you take a small plane to get across the Sierra Madre. But then, because it's a small plane, you have to weigh every kilo. So, for example, I am a 60-kilo person. They have to find someone who weighs almost the same as me. I get to sit at the right side, the other person gets to sit at the left. So they have to make sure that the weight is equal in the plane because it's a really small plane. So once we get to Palanan, we have to make a lot of courtesy calls. I'm not sure if it's the same situation with the researchers in other countries, but here in the Philippines, when you tell people that you work in the forest, they will automatically assume that you are a revolutionary, plotting against the government. So they don't believe that I go in the forest to measure trees. For them, it's just an excuse. So once we get to Palanan, we have to make sure that we show our faces to all of these offices. Otherwise, they will think that we are there to plot against the government. Yeah, so we go to the police, we go to the army, we go to the town mayors to make sure that they know us. So that's the social context behind the science. So it's not always the same in other areas, but we make sure that the local communities know us so that they also understand why we are there. So after doing all these courtesy calls, then we can finally start walking to the plot. So the walk to the plot is usually flat area for about 30 minutes, and then it starts to get a little scrubbier. So because of the frequent disturbances in the plot, there are a lot of tree falls that you encounter and a lot of streams. So you either go on top of those tree falls or you go under those tree falls. And then we arrive in our home in the forest. So this is our base camp. So it's compared to other field stations in other countries, this is relatively very primitive, to say the least. So we have a small kitchen or a dining area. We have an area for storage of our supplies, and we have a work area here where all our local team members converge to do the things we have to do for the recensus. And then at night and during the morning, this area turns into our living space. So we also sleep in that area. We hang our clothes in that same space. So it's a 24-hour working living space. For the plot, we have to maintain the plot. So all of the corners of the plot have to be staked and marked, and then we have to use transit tapes to make sure that the stakes are still aligned. And then we have to orient the guide, so we have to make sure that they know the protocols and that they know how to input data. Yeah. And we also have to teach them how to measure the trees. So there are certain things that you have to do. You have to take out the lianas, you have to make sure that they measure from the sloping area. And then we can finally do the census proper. So during the census proper, we divide into separate teams. There's a person who writes, so that's the team leader. There's a person who measures the trees, and there are people who search for the tags. So the tree tags, because it's been about 5 years since the last tree census, so the tags are usually in the ground. So we have to search for the tags in the ground before we are able to identify the tree. So the plot is a 16-hectare plot, so it's a 400 by 400 plot, and every 5 meters is marked. So for example, this tree right here has a tree number. So when we go to that specific quadrat and go to the local XY coordinates, you will see that tree. So once we find that specific tree, we measure it again. If we don't find it, then we record it as missing or dead. And then we also encounter new trees or recruits. So when we find new recruits, you have to tag that tree. So every tree is given a unique tag. So it doesn't, so that you have an absolute number of the trees or the stems that you actually have in the database. We measure the DBH, we record the X and Y coordinates, we take voucher specimens, and we identify the plants. So for plant identification, if you have flowers or fruits, you take specimens, and then you have field guides. We look at our notes, we look at the trees, the characters, the leaves, so that we can identify the species. So the pre-census is they always say that a community takes a village to do a census. So the last pre-census, it took 15 guides, 2 people who are just dedicated to encoding the data, 4 people who paint the trees, where we will measure the trees, 1 cook who cooks for all of us, and 5 team leaders who do the data encoding. So it really takes an effort of the whole community. So after all that, after 30 years of doing all that periodically, what have we known? So can you take it back 1 slide, please? there. So because we have every tree measured, tagged, located, we know where each tree is, and we can the previous slide, please. There. So we know where every tree is. So we have about 75,000 trees recorded from 323 species, of which 138 is endemic. So the white spaces there are streams where you don't have plants. All the rest of the spaces, they are occupied by plants. So because we also have identification of each tree, we know what types of topography or what clustering each species exhibits. For example, this tree, Nephelium rambutan ake. So I think you all know rambutan. So this is our local rambutan. So we don't have a specific preference for the area. As opposed to the big dipterocarps right there, the Shorea negrosensis, they're mostly found in the ridges. And some species like Ficus fistulosa, we also saw that they're restricted to certain soil pH levels. So that is the amount of information that you can get. So we multiply this to 323 times because each species has its own species map. And according to the number of trees itself, the most dominant families would be the Meliaceae, the Dipterocarps, Sapindaceae, and Lauraceae. But for the basal area, almost half of the basal area in the plot is from the Dipterocarps. So I think you should have seen the Dipterocarps that we have in the Philippines in the Makiling Botanic Gardens. So in terms of abundance, the most abundant trees would be the smallest trees. So, and then the abundance would taper as the trees grow bigger. According to to a paper in 2016, the typhoons have a huge impact on the mortality of the trees. So the blue line represents the background mortality rates if you don't have typhoons. The red lines show when there is a typhoon, how much mortality is experienced in the plot. So the mortality rate is significantly higher when you have typhoons. However, the recruitment is 3 times higher when you have typhoons. So it's like the cycle of nature. The old trees die, but new trees begin to take their place. However, it will take centuries for them to grow in order to make up for the basal area lost. We also have phenology monitoring data for 110 species. So we know that there are some species that tend to grow almost throughout the year. There are also some species that only flower and fruit during a certain month of a year. So in summary, all of that 30 years data, for us, it shows that the Balanan forest appears to be highly resistant and resilient to frequent typhoon disturbances. So because they are already being battered regularly by the typhoons, the plant communities in the area have already adapted to that condition. So if we let the forest be, it will recover after a strong typhoon. So our ways forward. So the GeoTrees initiative is a global initiative that aims to establish the world's first ground-based open access reference system for the calibration and validation of our satellite-based biomass products. So if you have heard, NASA and the European Space Agency, they spend billions of dollars and euros to develop and deploy missions in the space. So these space missions, the goal of these space missions is to estimate biomass on Earth. So the question is, why are we spending billions billions of euros and dollars to put sensors in space, but we don't invest in ground-based studies. So the GeoTrees initiative its aim is to unify the measures from space with the ground truth measures in our plots. So to do this, we have to collect data from aerial LiDAR. So this is an example of the aerial LiDAR from the Palanan plot, where you get the sample of the canopy. And just a few months ago, we extended this to cover 1,000 hectares in the Sierra Madre. So the goal is to relate the biomass from space to the biomass that we see here. And then we also there. So we also have to do terrestrial LiDAR scanning. So we scan from above the canopy. We also have to scan under the canopy. So if we scan under the canopy, what we get is a structure of the forest. So can you, there. So this is an example of a forest point cloud where you have individual trees that is scanned by the terrestrial laser scanner. So what information can we get from this? Right now, biomass is estimated just from the diameter of a tree. So you measure a tree at one point, and then an estimate of the height. And then you use the equations, allometric equations, to compute biomass. But that is not how trees actually are in real life. Trees can have edges, they can have buttresses, they have twigs, they have leaves, and these also contribute to the biomass of the tree. So with terrestrial LiDARs, we are able to establish what is the actual biomass that is present in these trees. And also, lastly, the diameter that we measure, we assume that the tree is circular. So we compute the area and the volume based on an assumption of circularity. But with terrestrial laser scanning, you don't have to assume this. So it shows here, for example, that the assumed DBH is 30 if you assume it to be circular, but the functional DBH is 33 because the tree is not always circular. So this is the example of data that we can get once we have the measure of the terrestrial laser scans. So actually, tonight I will go to Palanan to perform this. So hopefully, after a year, we will be able to integrate data from space to data from the canopy and data from the ground so that we can have a better estimate of the biomass that is actually present in our protected areas. So lastly, I'd like to say that the 30 years in Palanan is not my work. I've only been here for a couple of years. But the foundations were laid by some of our strongest Filipino scientists. So Dr. Edwino Fernando is here. He was recently conferred the academician status. Dr. Sandra Yap, and two of our biodiversity heroes that unfortunately left us a little bit too early. So Sir Leonard Go and Dr. Perry Ong. Without them, all the efforts that I showed you would not have been possible without their strong foundations. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy your trip today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lilian Jennifer Rodriguez, for that informative talk. Let's give her again a